the sun rocks the earth, grain falls from the stalk. Come away with me, wanderer, come away with the noon wraith. If a peasant reaping in the fields has their wits about them, they might notice the grain crops swaying gently despite the windless day. Perhaps shepherding their flock through a meadow, they might find a lost wedding ring or a torn veil smirched with dust and rot. If they were cleverer, they'd have observed the sun reaching its zenith and left the meadows for the safety of their houses before noticing any of these things. But woe betide the ones who ignore these signs. Hey guys, my name is Drew, and in this episode of my Witcher lore and mythology series, I'm going to be talking about raves. More specifically, noon raves and night raves. Every spirit that remains tethered to the world due to unfinished business after the death of its body transforms into a wraith. However, noon raves and night raves in particular are the spirits of young women who died violent deaths before their wedding day. Known only to haunt rural places, noon raves appear in the fields when the sun is at its highest, while night raves haunt long after dusk, at the approach to the darkest part of the night. Suffering endless, indescribable pain, their howls of grief echo across the fields, and unable to seek peace, they restlessly wander, seeking their unfaithful lovers or jealous killers, often killing innocent people in their quest for revenge. Lost in purgatory, straddling the line between reality and the afterlife, some folks speculate that there is a way to appease their tortured souls, releasing them from limbo and freeing the people of their plight. In this video, we're going to look a little closer at these peculiar spectres. Are they just pests, or is there something profoundly tragic at play? Born of sadness and the midday heat, noon raves oftentimes appear in the fields to dance madly together, creating the air vortices that rustle the still standing grasses. Disliking to be seen, they force anyone caught watching them dance to join them until they drop. Other times, a single wraith may, driven mad with pain and anger, simply wander the fields searching aimlessly for a lost love, attacking anyone who gets in the way. Wreathed with sunbeams that mirage their rotted appearance, from afar they seem like beautiful maidens as they dance, but in reality, noon raves appear as corpses far gone with rot. Clothed in the tattered remnants of their wedding dresses, their skirts are caked with grave dirt and sway gently in the same false breeze as the grasses that herald their arrival. They are desiccated and skeletal, their blackened skin clinging to their bones. On their heads sit the traditional flower wreath of brides, atop hair clinging sparse and thin to their eyeless skull. Jawbones being the first to fall from the body as the tendons decay, a preternaturally long tongue lolls from a jawless mouth below missing teeth. Often they howl with grief despite their mangled face. At noon each day, according to folklore, serfs toiling in the fields will interrupt their work and take a break, not from the harsh sun, as is commonly believed, but to avoid the presence of noon raves. Since children in particular are susceptible to wonder at the noon wraith, peasant children are taught from infancy on the dangers of playing in the fields at midday. However, peasants may not find respite from these demons by the setting of the sun, for the noon wraith's counterpart, the night wraith, wanders the fields by the light of the moon. Exuding sadness, night raves draw their power from moonlight, which one might say makes them somewhat less dangerous. After all, regular wraiths are strongest during a new moon. Could not this mean that the night wraith's power too waxes and wanes? Legend suggests that this monster can sneak into homes and murder the inhabitants in their sleep, however, making them perhaps far more sinister than their midday counterparts. Travelers are usually the ones most likely to encounter this nocturnal creature, but all are warned to avoid crossing fields and meadows at past sundown. So, we have a vague idea of what causes these ghosts to haunt the pastures, but how can they be purged? Numerous accounts have sprung up across the northern kingdoms of sightings, and in almost every instance, simply killing the creature is not enough. It is hypothesized that both noon raves and night raves do not roam aimlessly, but are connected to the land and often the people with which they are familiar. They are driven by vengeance for an unfulfilled life, and thus it seems that closure is needed in order for them to pass on to the other side. A noon wraith who acquired the moniker of the White Lady in the district of Far Corners was attached to the fields surrounding Drahim Castle. She haunted the field all day, preventing the peasants from being able to harvest the grain, which had grown heavy on the stalks. Originally a woman called Lucy, the White Lady slashed her wrists with a dagger before her arranged wedding to a man she did not love, and in order to free her, the silver dagger needed to be burned. Once this was done, the lady could be lured out and banished for good. When tragedy deprives these women of a chance to walk down the aisle, the heart-wrenching memories seem to interfere with their crossing to the afterlife. The reason for this ritual is unclear, but examples stack up whenever a wraith of this variety is spotted. Take Jenny of the Woods. This night wraith haunted the fields of Midcopse. Actually named Zula, Jenny of the Woods was in life murdered by a man she had previously spurned. In order to provoke her from her hiding place, the knife that killed her and a letter in her shallow grave needed to be burned after twilight. The letter reads, "Even though I told him I don't want to know him, I know you're not afraid of Bokai, but I am. He says he loves me, but it's not the kind of love I have with you. It's a fierce, frightening kind. Bokai won't leave us alone ever. We have to run. Leave your reply in the usual spot. Your Zula." And there we see Zula's suffering and the series of events that led to her untimely death. A final example of this ritual comes in the form of the Devil by the Well. This so-called devil was a Noonwraith who haunted the well in an abandoned village named Hovel. Abandoned is somewhat of a misnomer, however, as Hovel was burned down after all the residents were massacred by a local lord for a slight against his son. The woman who insulted him, named Claire, was hanged by the well's bucket line and left to rot. The Noonwraith created in the wake of Claire's hanging circled the location of her death eternally, and her only escape would come from a brave challenger. Her bracelet needed to be burned before she could be sent on her way. The trend is pretty clear at this point. Closure seems to be the key for defeating these spectres. One may find a noon or night wraith and fight it at any time it appears, but it will always return to that fateful spot. If one is to be slain for good, you must find the object binding it to the physical realm and then burn it. This object is personal to the woman the wraith used to be. In some cases, you need only find the sentimental objects, while in others you may need to burn the remains of the body as well. The final seems to be the time of day. Noon for a noon wraith and the twilight hours for a night wraith. The process of provoking these disturbed spirits is usually enough to bring tears to the eyes of the toughest man, and some may even be so overcome by emotion that they pity the wraith, underestimating the true danger of the threat they are meddling with. But if you've come this far and find yourself knelt beside the smouldering ashes of a campfire with the appropriate items in hand, be prepared for a fight. As the old saying goes, fight a noon wraith at midday and be dead before dusk. Having been caught out in the glare and baking heat of the midday sun or the soft silver glow of moonlight, one may think themselves caught by delirium. In actuality, the wraiths can create doppelgangers, mirror images of itself which circle their victims in their wild dance, obscuring the monster's true form. These copies must be destroyed to reveal the true wraith with all haste, as they sap vital energy from any nearby source. Beware though, that even when you reveal the true wraith, these wretched creatures may kick up clouds of dust in their wild whirlings to further blind and disorient their attackers. These wraiths may also turn themselves immaterial, passing back through the veil in order to thwart any who confront them. In this incorporeal form, they become incredibly difficult to wound, and so a wise witcher would be prudent to cast the sign of Erden upon the ground and lure the wraith into the trap thus created. In using this sign, the creature is slowed significantly, and once it regains physical form, a silver blade will make short work of it. If a courageous challenger without knowledge of signs faces off against one of these wraiths, the encounter will be far more deadly, but it is not impossible. They are also particularly susceptible to spectre oil, an unguent of urinaria and bear fat, and to the silver splinters spat forth by moon dust bombs. Like almost all the creatures in the Witcher universe, the Noonwraith has a real-world counterpart. She is a Polish spectre known as Północy, or Lady Midday. Far fairer of face than the game's counterpart, Lady Midday takes the form of a beautiful maiden. Sometimes she may also appear as a young girl or old crone. Dressed in white, Lady Midday became a way for people to explain sunstroke, while also being handy for keeping children away from valuable crops. Clutching a scythe or a pair of shears, she takes the form of whirling dust and stops those working in the fields to engage them in conversation, plying them with riddles or other difficult questions to which she knows they won't have the answer. Should the victim answer incorrectly or try to change the subject, she attempts to strike their heads from their shoulders or drive them to madness, giving rise to the neck pains and delirium that herald heatstroke. Folktales suggest that if you see her before she does you, you must lie down and remain very still until she passes. Lady Midday encompasses the more sinister side of the Noonwraiths, with a blade instead of claws, but unlike the spectres in the Northern Kingdoms, she does not seem to share the same tragic past, instead acting out of sheer sadistic satisfaction. Either way, if the life of the common peasant wasn't already difficult enough, the Noonwraith will exacerbate their fears drastically, giving every living soul a reason to worry when the winds howl through the wheat and barley. What stands out to me so strongly about these spectres, the Noonwraith in particular, is that they add a new dimension of intrigue to the usually mundane life of toilsome labour for a common peasant. One thing the Witcher universe does fantastically is bring to life the world outside of the palaces and the courts. A specific excerpt from the first book, The Last Wish, comes to my mind. Dandelion halted his horse and looked around. "Look, Geralt, isn't it beautiful here? Idyllic, damn it, a feast for the eyes." The land sloped gently down to a mosaic of flat, even fields, picked out in variously coloured crops. In the middle, round and regular like a leaf of clover, sparkled the deep waters of 3 lakes, surrounded by dark strips of alder thickets. The horizon was traced by a misty blue line of mountains, rising above the black, shapeless stretch of forest. The Witcher 3's exceptional graphics, combined with the imagery of the books, gives life to every glen and glade. And the reason I brought this up is because I think the stark contrast between the wondrous landscapes and the hideous noonraves plaguing them is what makes them so fascinating to me personally. It's easy to scare folks when the moon is full, but to keep burly farmers shut inside during the middle of the day is a much greater feat. And though they may look like fragile corpses easily defeated, the race of Noon and Night are fearsome monsters, to be afforded both respect and sympathy. The spirits of women corrupted by violent death before their wedding day, they are wretched creatures who live in perpetual despair, both hating and envying the living, unable to seek peace. Their tethers to this world must be broken, or they will be doomed to haunt the fields forever. And that concludes the tragic tale of the Noonraves and Nightraves. If you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a like. And if you're new and want to support the channel going forward, why not subscribe? Thank you so much for watching. I'm Drew, and I'll see you next time.